My name is Thomas Jackman, and I am the Energy Facility Siting Council's Rules Coordinator. And today we'll be discussing the Council's contested case rulemaking. As I said, this meeting is recorded, and it is intended primarily for RAC members who are part of this Rules Advisory Committee. Let me actually just share my presentation here. I guess you don't need to see this just yet, but might as well. There we go. So yeah, it's intended primarily for RAC members, but members of the public are welcome to attend. This is considered a public meeting. There will be a short time at the end for public comment, but please remember that you will have, as members of the public, multiple opportunities to comment on this process before any proposed rules become final. Most importantly, during the public comment period, after proposed rules are first submitted to the Secretary of State. So let's get into it. What we'll do introductions in just a second, but I wanted to just discuss the agenda here. So first we're going to do introductions. Then I'm going to do just a brief overview of the rulemaking and the contested case process, both, just so we're kind of all have a little bit of background information if you're not super familiar with either of these processes. I'm going to have a little opportunity for questions and comments that people have about just basics. Nothing real substantive there. I'm then going to give a brief introduction about the purpose and reason for this rulemaking. As you'll see, the scope is pretty broad, so it won't take long to go over that. Then there's going to be kind of the bulk and the purpose of today's meeting is going to be an open discussion for comments and suggestions from each of the RAC members on key issues and areas of concern that the RAC wishes to see as part of this contested case rulemaking. Obviously, we're not going to be able to make everybody happy, but if you have some great ideas, we want to hear from them, hear from you about them. Then there'll be a very short period at the end. If there's any members of the public who are here who have a desire to make a comment, there should be about 10 minutes at the end, hopefully, and then we will discuss next steps. A lot of times these RAC meetings are like 3 hours. I decided to do this one a little bit shorter. I find that the longer ones, people tend to kind of fade out. I certainly do. It's tough to meet for 3 hours on something. That being said, if we really have a lot of great ideas and it's really we feel like we're short on time, we might go back to 3 hours for the next RAC. And I'm kind of open to the members to see what they think. So without further ado, I thought the introductions is always a little awkward because in these Teams meetings, because I can't point and look at people. So I just kind of listed out the RAC members by who you represent. And I just thought, just start down the list so you can see where you are here, starting with Pacific Core. If you represent that particular constituent, if you could please unmute yourself and kind of let the group know who you are. And if there's more than one of you, that's fine. Go ahead and both speak up, and then just go down this list here.
This is John Anello from Pacific Core. I'm in here for my manager, Bryce Foster, who unfortunately couldn't attend, but we're in the project management group, and we deal a lot with these kind of issues. So we'll be representing the company.
Great, thanks. Anybody else from Pacific Core here today, John? Okay.
I didn't see any names I recognized.
Okay. All right. What about Northwest Natural?
Yeah, this is Andy Bauer, the Environmental Compliance Manager at Northwest Natural, and then also typically the point of contact for all of our FSEC site certificates that we hold.
Okay. Sorry, I realized that I was looking at my presentation and it didn't sync with the shared one. So here we go. Not what I said earlier might make a little more sense now. Davis Wright Tremaine.
Yeah, hi everyone. This is Derek Green. I'm attorney with Davis Wright Tremaine. My colleague Elaine Aldrich is maybe joining as well too. Just back to Tom's point, what we were trying to do was just make sure one of us could cover most of these meetings from there. So you might see one of us or both of us just on this first one as well too. I'm here. We don't represent a specific applicant or client for this matter, but Elaine and I have both been through the FSOC process multiple times and through the contested case process some as well too. So we're here happy to be a part of this and to help contribute as we can.
All right, great. Renewables Northwest.
Hello, everybody. My name is Max Green. I'm the Deputy Director at Renewable Northwest. We're a 501c3 nonprofit that has a decarbonization mission focused on transitioning to clean energy in Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and Montana. I'm an attorney by background. I've served on past FSEC RACs, and prior to my work at Renewable Northwest, I do have some experience engaging in contested case citing processes in other jurisdictions. So hopefully can bring some of that experience, legal background, as well as working with some of our member developers and organizations to bring sort of the voice of the clean energy community into this RAC. And although we had, I think, talked at one point about having my colleague Diane Brandt be sort of an alternate or joint RAC member with me, as it turns out. Instead, that will be my colleague Emily Griffith, who is also here in the Teams meeting today.
Okay. Irene, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Do I need to unmute myself here, I guess?
No, you're on. I can hear you, so you're unmuted.
Okay. Anyway, I'm Irene Gilbert, and I'm here representing the public. I have been involved with contested cases with FSAC, and so I'm familiar with the current process and actually what it looks from a public perspective.
Okay. I think he's. James, can you mute your mic here? Okay, sorry, Irene, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say I'm familiar with the process from a participant from the public perspective, and
right.
I guess that's all you need to know.
Yeah. All right. Thanks so much for being here, Irene. Jim. I think I saw you.
Yes.
Yep.
Jim Kreider here. I'm also with the public, but I'm also a member of the Environmental Justice Council. So I'll be kind of looking through these proceedings with that lens. And I too have been through one contested case. So I have lots of questions that having gone through it, I've made many errors and I found some corrections to those errors, but hopefully my stumbling through it will help us all make the process better for the next people. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Jim. Okay. Friends of the Columbia Gorge.
Hi, I'm Rudy Salacorn. I'm the Conservation Director for Friends of the Columbia Gorge. Friends looks after the interests of the National Scenic Area, which constitutes 6 counties in the Gorge on the Washington and Oregon side. I believe we contest many cases, so we are definitely interested in what's going on here and hope to be helpful. Thanks.
All right, great. Do really appreciate everyone coming and sending a representative here. If there are changes in who is going to be, who you basically want the point of contact to be, please let me know. That kind of deals with the charter here. So I sent you guys the charter. It's a pretty brief document. It kind of lays out just kind of expectations for how these meetings will go. My responsibilities are kind of what our hopes are for the participants, how non-committee member attendees could participate. So it's relatively high level, but it should hopefully answer your questions. If there's anything in there about the RAC process that you don't that you have questions about, you can reach out to me directly through my email. Probably is the best bet. In that RAC is going to be a list of the RAC members and their email addresses, which will be public information. If there are any updates, and it sounds like there is one, if you can please send me any changes, I'll get that changed, and this charter will be posted on the rulemaking page for people to review, as well as this presentation itself. So any materials that we produce as part of this RAC process will be made available on the website. So you don't need to, feel free to take notes or anything, but like, yeah, this presentation will be made publicly available. The PowerPoint and also a video that we're recording now will be posted online for you to go back and watch. If you're can't remember what somebody said, or that resource will be there for you to go back and review. Okay. Any questions? Any questions about the charter before I move on? Okay. So it sounds like a lot of you have, or at least many of you have been through the rulemaking process. So I'm going to make this relatively brief, but essentially this is a very high level overview of that process. We have already initiated the rulemaking, which was occurred in front of council. We kind of have a unique structure here. I am an employee of Odo, but I am retained by the Oregon Department of Energy to assist the Energy Facility Siting Council in their business, and I am the rules coordinator for that council. So the council is the determining body of volunteer members appointed by the governor to regulate the energy siting process in the state of Oregon. And we don't do anything without their say so. That includes the rulemaking process. So we have suggestions, we have ideas, we present those to council at council meetings that occur usually every month. And in this case, two council meetings ago, we proposed that we begin the contested case rulemaking, and we laid out our kind of vision in terms of the scope and objectives, and council approved that. So we kind of have our marching orders, and I'll be discussing that shortly. So now we are in kind of phase 2, which is the development of the draft proposed rules. And this is going to be the primary function of this Rules Advisory Committee, is coming up with a set of rules to present to council. We don't always use Iraq, but if the rulemaking is anything above kind of the relatively straightforward level, we like to use Iraq to get feedback from interested parties. So once we have developed that draft of the proposed rules, we'll enter the kind of formal rulemaking process, it's called, where we file with the Secretary of State a notice of proposed rulemaking, and that opens up opportunities for formal public comment period. Some people have several weeks to submit comments. During that time, we'll also have a hearing if people would prefer to do that verbally. And then once that process is complete, I will take those suggestions from the public, the RAC members. If you feel like you didn't get a chance to say your piece during the RAC process, you can submit additional comments during the public comment period. All of those comments will be in front of council without, in their entirety. So they'll have a chance if they desire to review them all. And then staff will, kind of do what we're paid to do, which is kind of analyze those and make our suggestions to council. Okay, so let's, I'm going to go through the contested case process as well. And then if anybody has any questions, Jim, I see your hand. You can, we'll get to them at that point. So the contested case process, it sounds again like many of you have gone through it. I just wanted to just touch on a few tidbits here, not get into the weeds too much, but just so we kind of all are on the same page about how the contested case process works. Essentially, the rules for that process are found in OAR 345 Division 15. And then there's a little bit in 345 Division 1, Rule 5, which discusses incorporation of the Attorney General's model rules. We'll be discussing that in a little bit too. But essentially, it's 345 Division 15, Rules 12 through 85. So that's the contested case process in the rules. The issues and they're mandatory. The contested case process is mandatory for every site certificate application, and if nobody desires to contest the process, then there's just kind of a formal closing out, but we don't skip this step. The issues are limited to those raised on the record within council's jurisdiction with sufficient specificity, which is going to be a big issue, I'm guessing. And it's generally managed by an independent hearing officer appointed by council. To my knowledge, we've never done it any other way, but it technically doesn't have to be, but that is how we generally proceed. So another big issue is party status. Who's a party? The applicant and the department are automatically parties to a contested case. But then the issue is who else can be a party, and the rules as currently stated define that as any person who appeared in person or in writing at the draft proposed order public hearing. That leads through kind of a very kind of legal process with evidence and cross-examination and information gathering, testimony, all that stuff, ultimately leading to a final order by the hearing officer, and the council can then reject it in whole, say we didn't like anything, any outcome of the or any suggestion from the hearing officer, or they can approve it in whole or approve it with modifications, which is essentially council's prerogative with regard to everything they do. If the council does approve of the final order, then the end result is the council must issue the site certificate. Once that the final order is approved or rejected, then the application the process is then subject to judicial review, which is kind of the last step. So appeal of the final order goes directly to the Oregon Supreme Court. So we get relatively speedy resolution as far as these things are concerned. It doesn't go beyond the Oregon Supreme Court. And our staff's perspective is that the contested case process is designed or should be designed to create a clean record of review for the Supreme Court should any party wish to appeal the final order. So the goal is to not drag this process out. And if we do our job right during the contested case process, it should be pretty easy for the Supreme Court to make a determination as to how things should go if we've done our job correctly. So I kind of sped through that because we don't have a ton of time. But Jim, did you have a question about either the rulemaking process, or obviously we're going to get into the weeds on the contested case process, so I suppose we should probably table that.
Tom, I just put it into the chat. The only thing that I was looking at is that on page 2, figure 1 of the overview of the permanent rulemaking process that you had sent out prior, that flow chart is a little bit different than the one you just presented. And it just seemed like the public involvement sections were kind of left out. And I just wanted to point out that they were 2 different tables or figures, and just wondering why.
I just kind of condensed it. The process that I went over, I mean, it still has the same kind of public, I mean, it is the same process. So if my condensing lost some fidelity, my apologies, but essentially the public can participate now in a limited sense through these public meetings. But the main opportunity for public participation is intended to be during the once the notice of proposed rulemaking has been issued. The RAC is considered, essentially members of the public too. So the RAC is also kind of a public portion. It's just a more focused portion, designed to go deep into kind of constituent concerns about whatever it is that we're trying to do. Does anybody else have any questions about?
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, no worries, Jim. Okay, well, let's move right along here. So the scope is basically everything that talks about the contested case in Division 1, which, as I said before, was the adoption of the Attorney General model rules, and Division 15, where it discusses the contested case process. Doesn't mean we're going to change everything or that we're going to radically change everything. It's just the scope is potentially any aspect of the contested case process that we are allowed to change. This is the time to consider making that change. So we're not putting any boundaries on that at the moment. The objectives of this rulemaking are kind of just primarily to make it more efficient. And as part of doing that, I'm going to table staff's, ideas. But one of the big ones that needs to be kind of let out of the bag now is that we do strongly intend, and we do want feedback on this, but it is our intent to switch from the adoption of the Attorney General model rules to the Office of Administrative Hearing rules, which are where it makes sense to do so. And I will be sending out a chart that kind of goes over a comparison between those two sets of rules, and hopefully once you get that document, you'll see why we want to make that change. But this rulemaking was going to be primarily focused on the other rules that aren't part of that incorporation. So just the rules that you see in Division 15. So and then as part of that process, we're going to be trying to identify and remedy areas where the existing rules have failed to provide sufficient clarity to participants in the rulemaking process and have become points of contention, kind of not for any real good reason other than that the rules aren't clear enough. So we want to make sure that for whether you love the outcome or not, hopefully we can all agree that the rules aren't vague and obscure as to the intent of how the process should go. And then just to be clear, really the only thing that's outside the scope is everything outside Division 15 and Division 1, which is primarily Division 27, where it talks about the contested case rules for the amendment process. We have the amendment process rulemaking coming up very soon. And so we were going to do anything that relates to the contested case process for the amendment process, we're going to be addressing at that time. So just makes it simple. If it's in Division 15, it's up for game. Does anybody have any questions? I mean, the scope and objectives is going to be the whole rack. So I don't necessarily want to get too into the weeds here, but does anybody have any questions, any kind of high level questions about what this rack is about? Okay. All right, so it is. Oh, we're ahead of schedule, which is great. So to keep this orderly, I basically what I want to do is sort of similar to the way we introduced ourselves. Is I want to just kind of go through. I'm just going to call on you one at a time, and if you don't have anything to share today, that's fine. But I'm going to be calling on each member of the RAC to affirm that they don't have anything, or if they do to give you time to share your thoughts with the rest of the RAC, kind of to launch us off on this process. If everybody has something to say, you have about 9 minutes. If everybody wants to talk, so just kind of keep that in mind. I'm not necessarily going to call time at like 9 exactly, but please be respectful of others, and keep an eye on the clock once you get started. If people are kind of go on too long, then I will eventually cut you off just to make sure that everybody has a chance to speak up. And I just want you to remember this is kind of rack 1, so my goal is to kind of raise the ideas. We're not going to really get into the debates about whether they're the merits of them just yet. My intent is to gather everybody's suggestions from this first rack here and put together kind of a packet that I will then distribute with the group, and then we'll be looking for comments and thoughts from rack members about kind of everybody else's ideas. So this time period is just really about kind of explaining your ideas to the group so that people can know where you're coming from and understand your ideas when they're providing comment. So we're going to just go in the reverse order of what we did on the introductions. So starting with Friends of the Columbia Gorge, you win. Take it away.
I will make this very brief because I don't really have anything to add at the moment. I really came to listen today. The materials that was provided were mostly orientation materials. So I'm really hoping to get stuff out of today's meeting so I can come back and confer with other folks in our org. That's me. Thanks.
No worries. No worries. Jim.
Hey, I do have some questions. they may not have sufficient specificity at this time to really flush out clearly, but
Sure.
just want to share some things that I've run across. One is that defining or examples of specific specificity, degree to which one has to comment, because in the one docket that I was in, we had to appeal to FSAC, the council itself, to overrule the administrative rules judge. And, you know, it might behoove us to take a listen to the discussion of how the council members were able to understand what was being brought up, but how the ALJ did not. And there was a fairly robust debate over whether the party made themselves clear enough for it to go into the record to be contested. So I think some work around that specific specificity would be helpful. Another thing is party, a full party versus a partial party. There was a lot of discussion on that as to how do you become a full party so that you can question all individuals in the case, or how you become a limited party. That's something that I think the rules could work on to clear up a bit. My notes here. Oh, there's a section here, the order on petitions for party status. It talks about that, how that may be issued before or after the pre-hearing conference. I'm thinking it might be worthy to discuss that, because when we were involved, we're trying to sort out all the issues and set a schedule at the same time, which kind of put the cart before the horse sometimes, is that we were looking at a schedule before we knew all the issues and the timeframes it would take to address them. So the order of that might be something for us to discuss as we go through. Another thing to go through would be good on typical contested case schedule, motions for discovery orders, and how exactly they're done, and then how that discovery has to happen. I know for us, for myself being new, how you subpoena somebody who won't answer your questions, that was kind of tricky. And I think some clarification in that area would be helpful. Also getting into sir rebuttals and sir rebuttals. In the case we were in, we had sir rebuttals that most of the attorneys that we knew and worked with, that was a relatively rare thing for them to see and hear, and to maybe better clarify how that back and forth goes on in a contested case. And that's kind of a highlight of my notes right now. I've got more details in here. I don't know how deep to go, but I think I've hit off with 3 or 4 key things that I'd like to see us discuss and clarify a little bit more.
Okay, that was a great, I mean, that was a great list. We've definitely, those are key areas for sure. And yeah, those are some great ideas. Okay, Irene, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Okay, I too have some things, and actually some of mine is going to probably
That's fine.
It's going to already been spoken to. But one thing I'd like to do is compare the Attorney General's rules with what is being proposed in terms of the contested case process. One of my concerns is that I would like to see some timeframes included in the rules where when a hearing is held, there's some time between when the hearing is held and when decisions happen with FSAC. I know the last time I commented, we were commenting on one day and the proposed order came out the next day, where a couple of the council members themselves said that they really weren't going to have the time to do a thorough review of the comments were. So I would like to see us have some requirement that the council is provided an opportunity, I mean, time-wise, to really consider the comments before they're making a decision. Another concern that I have is, I know that the department is the staff to the council, but there is no opportunity really for the public to have anything to say about the recommendations that come from the department. And sometimes those recommendations don't thoroughly describe the concerns of the public. So I don't know, when we get to that section, I'd really like to have some discussion about that process for presenting information to the council. I'm with Jim as far as I'd like to see specificity clearly defined. Does that mean that people have to reference specific rules? I know there are some, you know, there have been some court cases and things like that about what is included in a comment compared to what appears as a contested case issue. But the issue of specificity seems to be one that catches a lot of people by surprise. I'm very concerned about the party status issue, and I'll give you an example. We were in a contested case recently, and all of the public members were given limited party status, and the department and the developer were given full party status. So what happened is, during the hearing, there were requests for summary determination from the developer, and nobody from the public could argue against them because we were all limited. And so we hadn't specifically commented on that issue, thinking that it wasn't even going to be discussed. And then all of a sudden, there were conditions in the site certificate that were removed without any input from the public. So that issue is a real sore spot right at the moment. The other thing that I noted is, in the hearings rules, it specifies 3 divisions that people can reference. I think it's 20, must be 21, 22, 23, something like that. At any rate, I don't think we should be saying these are the only divisions that can be talked about or commented on, or a contested case request made on, because some of the rules have pieces that are really significant that are kind of spread out in other rules. So like for instance, as I recall, the requirement for monitoring is in a different rule number than the ones that are listed. Don't quote me on that, but I think when you say these are the 3 rules you've got to be addressing in contested cases, I think that contested cases probably are broader than just those 3 rules. Also, when it comes to comments, I think there needs to be some clarification about what it means to have stated your issue. And what brings this up is there's some court cases that say things like, if someone's brought up the issue, that doesn't limit the arguments regarding that issue. And I think that there have been hearings officers who have said, well, you didn't talk about that part, how that influences this issue, therefore you can't include it in your arguments. So I think we need to look at that. I guess that's probably enough for me right now. Maybe more than enough for you. So
Okay.
I'm going to let somebody else talk.
Sure. And just on that note, thanks so much, Irene, for all of your suggestions and thoughts. Well, we'll get to it in a little bit. So when everyone's finished, Renewables Northwest, if you have any thoughts, we'd love to hear them.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, I think I'd like to start with some context, and I won't have quite the same list of specifics as some of the folks who have commented so far. So we kind of come into this rulemaking against the backdrop of having worked on passing and now trying to implement House Bill 2021 from the 2021 legislative session, which requires Oregon's largest utilities to move to 100% clean electricity by 2040. And also included in that that bill that passed a couple years ago was a general policy statement saying that the legislature, you know, wanted this transition to 100% clean energy to be carried out to the maximum extent practicable in a way that brings direct benefits to Oregon communities. So there was definitely a hope, and I spoke to this hope in some of my legislative testimony at the time, that a significant number of projects supporting this clean energy transition would be built in Oregon. If you look at the first clean energy plans that have come out from both PacifiCorp and PGE, the scale of the need to build and develop new facilities to make sure that we can achieve that 100% clean electricity mandate is really significant. It is likely that FSEC is going to be very busy in the coming years. And in particular, you know, there's not only a 2040 100% mandate, but also a mandate that those utilities reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by 2030. And getting there, which is, you know, seven years away, 6 years away, depending on, you know, how you look at it calendar-wise. It means a lot of work, not just over the coming decade, but really in the next few years, because in order to achieve those emission reductions by 2030, you're going to be going through permitting processes essentially now that allow the you know, the project to get permitted and then built and then actually operate in a way that allows the utility to be displacing emitting resources. All that's to say, there's going to be a lot of work happening at FSEC. Meanwhile, from the perspective of an organization that works with a lot of renewable energy developers, has a lot of developers in our membership, FSEC is generally considered one of, if not the most onerous permitting processes in the country. I have heard not just anecdotally, but, you know, concretely from some of our developer members that they will not build projects here because the process is so lengthy and cumbersome compared to, you know, the opportunities that exist in other states. And I don't bring that up today actually to criticize FSEC, but rather to praise you for undertaking this rulemaking and centering efficiency in that first bullet point. I think that's going to be the watchword that we bring to this rulemaking process and encourage other participants to do so as well. Efficiency doesn't have to mean, you know, it doesn't have to be in direct conflict with robust public engagement, but we're going to be looking for ways that the process can become less lengthy and less costly, while still ideally preserving or even potentially, you know, ensuring that there are more robust opportunities for public engagement. And I think some of the things that we've heard from other RAC members so far, and that are in the staff memo, are probably a good way to do that, adding clarity and specificity to the rules so that people know what meaningful engagement in an FSEC contested case process looks like. So yeah, we definitely support the idea of trying to ensure that the rules provide you know, more information to potential you know, interested parties as to how to raise issues with adequate specificity to preserve them, in the hope both that the sort of arguments that project proponents are going to want to understand and address can get raised clearly, and that some of the stuff that's maybe less well developed or less clear or less well supported by the evidence on the application gets culled out early, because there's no need to spend time on stuff that is kind of a hope as opposed to a real point of contention. There are other points in the rules, I'm sure, where we can add clarity that will benefit project proponents, and intervening parties will be kind of looking for those. I don't have a list right now. And I'm sure there are also other places in the process where we can potentially bring more efficiency to bear. So that's just sort of the lens that we intend to bring to this. And it's, again, as an organization that does not directly participate in contested case processes, I'm not going to have a laundry list, but sort of look forward to reviewing the ideas that come from some of the folks who do directly engage and trying to help find solutions. And I did also have one, I don't know if this is the right time, but question stemming from the staff memo that gave rise to this RAC, which I think you've kind of alluded to earlier, but the bullet that was included in the memo on clarifying what can be appealed to council and what cannot, was not sure exactly what that was referring to. So if at some point in the process today, you can maybe shed a little additional light on what staff was thinking there, I at least would appreciate it. That's all from me. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm happy to just hit that point real quick because we do have time. And also, I would like to kind of speak to your broader point as well, because I think it's worth repeating and just keeping in mind throughout this process. With respect to that bullet point, I don't know if Patrick is on. He's the staff attorney who represents council in these contested case hearings. But oh, there he is. My take, and actually I'd love for you to correct me if I'm wrong or confirm that I'm right, Patrick, is that essentially certain issues parties can take straight to council to get resolution, and other issues they have to wait until essentially a final order before they can raise that issue. Patrick, can you speak to that?
Yeah, the way it has been set up is that there aren't it's called the interlocutory appeal. There are no interlocutory appeals unless the hearing officer has made a decision that would terminate your involvement in the contested case. So let's say you have sought to raise 3 issues in the contested case, and the hearing officer believes that none of those issues should go to contested case for whatever reason. You didn't raise it with sufficient specificity. It's not within council's jurisdiction. If you wanted to bring 3 and the hearing officer rejects all 3, the result of that is now you're not able to participate in the contested case. So because your participation is completely cut off, you can appeal that to council. If you raise 3 issues and the hearing officer just says, no, one of these we're not going to engage in for whatever reason, you're still participating in the contested case on your other 2 issues, so you would not be allowed to appeal the dismissal of that one issue to the hearing officer. That's how it has been handled in the past, and that will certainly be subject to discussion during the course of this RAC.
Thank you. Appreciate the additional clarification there.
Thank you, Patrick. To the broader point, I just want to make it clear, we do have some rulemakings that are coming down the pipeline that I think are going to be very heavily subscribed to and attended, that are going to make it easier or harder for applicants to get a site certificate in the state of Oregon. This rulemaking is not necessarily designed to do that from a standards perspective, to basically lower the bar that an applicant has to meet to get a site certificate. However, the goal would be to make it less expensive and more efficient for this. I mean, there's no reason, unless you just I suppose there could be constituents who just don't want to build anything, and so they benefit from this process being as convoluted and as complex and as expensive as possible. Staff's opinion, and Sarah is on the call, can correct me if she disagrees, but is that the legislature essentially determines what the council has to consider and protect as part of granting these site certificates. And these applicants, they either meet these standards or they don't. And if they do, they should get a site certificate. And as part of getting that site certificate and establishing that they've met those standards, we should be making that process as efficient and cheap and quick as possible, whilst maintaining the quality that we can be confident that they are in fact meeting those standards. So as part of the process that's going to happen almost every time, on some level, it does happen on every time. We don't want this contested case process to be any more expensive or onerous than it has to be. It should be efficient. It should be quick. We should be having fights about, did the applicant meet the standard or did they not? We should not be having fights about, I'm a party, did I argue with this? Those are going to happen, but we should make sure the rules are as clear as they can be to minimize the amount of time that we spend in that process on those kind of process issues. So that's kind of my approach as the rules coordinator on this project is, where can we identify issues of confusion where we can create or modify the existing rules in a way that will make them easier to understand for the applicant, but also for those who want to participate in the process, so that they can preserve their rights. So they know, for example, has come up and it's going to continue to come up, what kind of sufficient specificity, and we should maybe come up with a shortened version of that, because it's really hard to say 3 times fast, especially. What does that mean? So, and knowing that, they can prepare ahead of time and then participate and have a discussion on the merits about, did the applicant meet the standards or not? Not have debates on, did I raise this issue? Did I not raise this issue? Again, those will inevitably come up regardless of what we do, but we should make sure the rules are not contributing to the confusion in that process. So some great comments from Renewables Northwest. Okay, let's move to Davis Wright Tremaine.
Yeah, Tom. So this is Derek. I'm going to pass over to Elaine, who's joined us here. I'll just say real quickly that I think that the scope of the objectives makes sense here. I look forward to kind of hearing more of the details from there. But I want to pass over to Elaine and let her have a chance to introduce herself as well.
Oh, you're muted, Elaine.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Good morning, Elaine Albridge with Davis Wright Tremaine. I'm a permitting partner here in our Portland office and been working with renewable energy developers navigate both local and state level siting processes. Happy and looking forward to participating. I'll echo a lot of the comments that Max raised from Renewable Northwest about the hopes for this RAC. I do think probably all parties involved would like a simpler, clearer process that's efficient. And so that's, I think, some common ground probably we all have for contested case proceedings. And just another kind of, practical thing to put out there is that how do the evidentiary, requirements in a contested case relate back to the DPO proceeding, and how could we make the DPO process more robust and have issues raised by stakeholders earlier in the process that would allow an applicant the opportunity to more fully address them on the DPO record to hopefully minimize the amount of issues that might go to contested case. So just thinking about ways we could work towards having less issues come up in a contested case and really have only the real substantive ones be the subject of contested cases. So we're not dealing with a contested case on every single project. Thanks,
Okay.
and look forward to participating.
All right. Thank you, Elaine. Northwest Natural.
I don't really have a whole lot at this point. I'm going to look, listen, and learn as this process moves forward. The one thing that I am interested in, and probably is already in some of the presentations we'll be providing, is who's responsible for the costs of a contested case and how are those divvied up between the parties? Other than that, I don't have anything at this point.
Okay. All right. Pacific Core.
I'm kind of in the listen and learn at this point as well, so I have no comments for the group at this moment.
Okay, no worries. All right, well, that is the RAC. I think we kind of have a good sense of how things are going. It kind of sounds like to me we have Irene and Jim, who represent the public, who have been involved in in the contested case process, and who have kind of identified, and staff has as well, kind of a lot of these issues where it is confusing to participants who are opposing projects to understand how to navigate the sort of, it is essentially a legal matter in terms of how it's framed and how it's approached. I mean, these people are not necessarily attorneys themselves, and so we have kind of these like legal concepts, like what is sufficient specificity, where we can add some clarification, some details. What does it mean to be a party? How do you what does it mean to be a limited party? These sorts of things that hopefully we can clarify in a way that we minimize the arguments in the contested case process to just the kind of the substantive matters. Again, like were the standards met? Were the standards not met? All right, well, I'm going to turn it over to the kind of public comment portion. We have actually quite a bit of time for public comment. If anybody who is not a member of the RAC, or if you are a member of the RAC at this point, if there are no members of the public who wish to speak up, if you are joining the team sessions, feel free to use the raise hand function. I don't see anybody who's just on the phone who called in, so use the little hand guy. Yes, we have Dugan. Hopefully I pronounced that right.
Yes, hello, Dugan, Mayor with Pine Gate Renewables. Just
Sorry,
wanted to
with whom?
Pine Gate Renewables, we're a renewable energy developer out of North Carolina, but that has developed several projects in Oregon.
Okay.
And has an application in front of the commission right now. Just want to voice our support for the words of Max Renewable Northwest, and agree with staff here about wanting to find efficiencies and just ensuring that this process is not can be made as quick and to a good decision as possible, whatever that ends up being. I think we similarly feel that we take a look at FSEC as compared to the other states we develop in, and it certainly is more robust, which is great in some ways, but that often leads to also administratively robust, which sometimes can cause problems. And we're committed to building the projects that Oregon wants, clearly by policy, but we also want to make sure that those are going to get through the process on time and not be unduly delayed. So excited to see this process move forward, and you'll probably, I don't know if we will directly comment, but we'll work with our groups, either the Oregon Solar and Storage Industries Association or other places. You'll probably see some comments from us on this rulemaking in the future. So just wanted to say hello. Well, thank you.
Awesome, great, perfect introduction there, and that was the perfect time to do so. We encourage. I should have said this at the beginning, but we definitely encourage each of you throughout this process to reach out to other similarly interested parties in kind of your space to kind of solicit additional feedback to bring to the RAC. So you don't have to just, this is not just you representing your, particular constituent. If you are kind of rub elbows with others who are in the similar field and you kind of share your thoughts and what's kind of going on, and they have additional thoughts or whatever, you can bring that feedback to the RAC. We're more than interested to hear that. But then again, those interested parties will have opportunities to directly reach out to the process, again, particularly during the public comment period. Are there any other public participants who are interested in making additional comments? Okay, not seeing anybody. I'm going to move on. So that brings us to next steps. So we're zoomed right through this. All right. So sounds like I can sort of predict how this is going to go. But if you have, after kind of listening to what was said today, I took notes. There's actually part of this. If you want, I can send it to you. Maybe I'll just upload it along with the video. But Teams does put out a transcript. It's not perfect. It's going to make mistakes, but it is a pretty accurate, fairly accurate transcript of what was said today. I could send that to you, but so I do have kind of a record of what was said. But if you felt like some clarity would be helpful, I guess I'm talking mainly to Irene and Jim, who provided the most substantive comments. It would be helpful for me because I'm going to take those suggestions and send them out to the group. I want to make sure that I'm accurately characterizing what it is that you want. Please submit some written comments to me by end of day tomorrow, just so that yeah, again, I can kind of give the RAC the best representation of whatever it is that you're interested in. The goal will then be that I will as quickly as I can kind of turn that around into a packet for the RAC to review. I'm going to, along with that packet, I'm going to send a essentially a Word document of the rules, just kind of a clean document that you can put your thoughts, directly into that document in track changes or in comment bubbles or whatever you want to do, to then share with the RAC about your thoughts and feelings about what was said today and what the other RAC members have said, or if you have not, or if you develop specific ideas like I want this rule to be changed to say X or whatever it might be. As part of that packet, I'm going to send out a vote. So we will, with just like we did for this one, it'll have a bunch of times. I don't want to push this too far out, but guessing it'll be about a month from whenever I send out that email next week, probably about 4 weeks out. And then whatever time you select, the group selects, will then kind of set the deadline for providing comments to the packet I send out next week. So the goal will be that you provide feedback to the RAC at least 2 weeks prior to that meeting. And then I will put together a presentation and thoughts and comments at least a week prior to that. So then we can all kind of come to the next RAC meeting on the same page, ready to go. So again, submit any written thoughts by tomorrow. If you felt like whatever you said today could have maybe had more clarity, or you just want to double check and make sure that what I send out to the group is an accurate representation of what you said. I'm going to get that back to you within the next week. And then probably that gives you roughly 2 weeks, 2-3 weeks to review those and provide comments. And then the RAC meeting will be scheduled for a week or two after that. So that's our next steps going forward. Does anybody have any questions or any additional thoughts about how this went? Just and one other thing, I'm going to kind of take those thoughts. I still haven't kind of locked in for sure exactly how the next RAC meeting is going to go. I think at this point, I'm probably going to, if there were a ton, like was like 1,000 suggestions, I was going to table staff's kind of proposals. But based on what I heard today, there's kind of a lot of overlap with what staff who is interested in doing as well. So I think I will be submitting kind of a red line with some of staff suggestions and thoughts about how we should proceed with these topics. And we'll be going over that at the next rec, along with what was presented today. So does anybody have any questions about next steps or what we're going to do?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Irene. Go for it.
Well, I just wanted to do one thing I hadn't commented on, but it's a real problem for the public, and that is there are a lot of attorneys involved with these contested cases. The public, in terms of having their issues heard, typically doesn't have the money for taking those cases forward. And in fact, the counties used to have a $50,000 budget to argue their cases if they disagreed. That was taken out. And so a lot of these counties don't have any, they just don't have $50,000 worth of wiggle room in their budgets to take issues forward that are really important to them. And I think that there should be some discussion about how how is the public able to have their issues seriously considered when, number one, they don't necessarily understand the process. And if we're talking about a process that a member from the public is supposed to be able to navigate, if you will, I was a trainer for years, and the standard that we were told we had to meet was in the 8th grade education could understand what I was training on when I was training safety rules. And I know I've seen some things that say that the rules that we're dealing with ought to be understandable at that level. Clearly, I'm questioning whether or not that's the case. I have a really difficult time negotiating these rules, and yet I have a lot of experience in reading and evaluating state jargon and how that really looks when it's in practical application. So I'm not sure what the answer is, but I think that we really need to consider the benefits of having people understand the process, because the language is understandable to the public. And I think that would really speed up the process. It would make for fewer contested cases in the long run. And so involving people from the public and having them understand early on, I think, is an important thing for us to try to keep as a goal.
I think those are great points, Irene. And actually, I've thought about this as well. And not everything that this RAC suggests has to necessarily have to do with like change this rule to this, add a word here, whatever. It could also be suggestions about how we could provide resources, whether it's like templates or suggestions or examples or kind of walkthroughs to help members of the public kind of navigate the process. Because while I certainly would hope that the outcome of this RAC and this rulemaking is the rules are easier to understand, that they're less confusing. They require fewer follow-up questions and fewer guesses. There's greater certainty and a wider, array of persons reading them will understand what was intended. But ultimately, you're never going to get everything. You can't do it all in the rules. So I have thought about what are ways that we can kind of provide additional help and resources that will make it easier for participants to understand what to do. So if anybody has any going forward as we kind of go through this process, if you have suggestions or thoughts or ideas, certainly worth considering at this time. So Jim, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on a suggestion I put into the comments, and that was developing an electronic filing system, somewhat like the PUC's Huddle, because during the contested case we were involved in, there were some 60 people in the docket sending emails to all those different people with file sizes getting above 50 megabytes. And people had their ISPs shut them down for spamming because it, fell outside of their parameters of, what's a regular residential user. So if ODOE for the contested cases could get a system that everybody just files to rather than replying to all, because in a reply to all, people do get lost and left out. So I just think a better centralized communication system for the dockets would be helpful to all concerned.
Yeah, no, that's a legitimate concern. I mean, I'll bring that up with the group, and it's got to be a better way. I don't necessarily know that would be something this rack can handle, but certainly something for staff to consider looking into. Are there any other thoughts or ideas? Okay, well, if that's the case, I really, really appreciate everybody participating. I know each of you kind of has different hopes or goals, but I would like to repeat Elaine's thought, which is that hopefully our common ground can be, let's make this whole process less terrible. And so whether you want a project to go forward, you can have more certainty about how this process is going to work, and also certainty about the amount of expense and time that'll be involved. Well, at least hopefully we can shrink that. And if you're opposed to projects, we can increase the certainty that you'll have, that you'll know what you need to do to participate and how to participate, so that you don't kind of make mistakes that result in a hearing officer down the road saying, you didn't do this exactly right, so you lost your chance to be involved in this process. So we want everybody to feel good about knowing how to navigate this system, even if the outcome isn't necessarily what is that they wanted. But yes, I do appreciate everyone here, and hopefully going forward we can have some really great, productive meetings. I abhor meetings where when you finish, you're like, well, what just happened? That could have been an email. So I'm going to really do my best to make sure that we have materials in front of the group, that we can actually, really make use of our RAC meeting and the precious time that you guys are sacrificing to participate, and we can get some good use of that time. So that is my goal, my commitment to you guys, that I will be giving that my best shot. If I mess up or I make any mistakes or things are confusing, or if you have any questions, please send me an email. Say, hey, I didn't get this, or did you mean to say that, or this date's wrong, or whatever. It doesn't hurt my feelings. I would rather you reach out to me rather than just keep that to yourself. If I offend or slight or do anything, this is not my intent. Please reach out to me and share any concerns you have with me as this process go forward. I'm hoping that we all enjoy this, and it's a good and productive enterprise. So with that, I will let everyone go. And again, I do appreciate everyone participating.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Tom.
Be safe, everyone.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tom.
Bye.
Bye, Irene.
Yeah.